Hey everybody, it's Christian Harris here again with the next basically Christian's Conversations with. Today I'm luckily enough to be joined by Matt Zillhardt. Kind of discussed perception in the job search that he's going through today. So Matt, nice to meet you.
And nice to meet you too, Chris. Great being here.
Appreciate it. Let's just start it off. Tell me a little bit about your career journey and what led you to kind of where you're at today.
My career journey has been kind of all over the place. I've been uh, a UX designer for the past about 10 years now. I was doing a bunch of different things prior to that. I come from a web design and front end development background, but really focusing more on the UX. I was contracting for the federal government with the Social Security Administration, and I was with them for about 2 years and then got laid off back in December of last year. So I've been kind of looking ever since for whatever the next step is. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know if I'm going to go back into, having a full-time job, traditional, or if I'm going to start going the freelance route or something. But well, I know really right now is that things are changing very rapidly in pretty much every industry and with the hiring process.
So can you give me a little insight, not being familiar, what is a UX designer?
Yeah, that's anybody outside of kind of the tech industry doesn't really has not probably not really heard of this term before. UX design, it's what it really is. It's a acronym for user experience design. Basically, we're the people that are designing how a product works on the web, like how you go about, buying something on Amazon, or how you go about uploading a video onto YouTube or anything like that. So, like all the steps that you're taking, all of the interactions that you're having with these computer platforms, that's really sort of what we're trying to build. So that's really what I do. And I focus on things like accessibility. I focus on things like ease of use, how simple it is. You look at something and it's like, kind of creating these intuitive interfaces and making smart user decisions.
So obviously and I think one of your posts said, like, 40 years of the internet, the quickest way is to send an email to is to send it to yourself,
Y-
which is
Yeah,
when you read that, I chuckled because I think that's actually, usually the case. So with your position, obviously with technology, that has to be in high demand, I would assume, right?
is you see a lot of jobs, posted, but at the same time, you have a lot of people applying to those jobs. Like I'll go ahead and I'm on LinkedIn and I see something that looks really good. And then it's like, and it was posted in the past, day or two. And I already see that there's been 100 people already hitting apply. Now, the problem with the whole thing with LinkedIn is that it might say there's been 100 people applied, but that just tracks. The thing about that is that that just tracks how many people hit that button, how many people hit that apply button. It doesn't tell you how many people actually completed the application process. It also doesn't tell you how many people are actually qualified for the job because there's people that are going to hit apply and they're juniors or people that just completed a boot camp or something, and they might have like a year or two of experience. But this company, it's like, no, we're looking for a senior UX designer. We need somebody that has more than 5 years of experience. So it's not really the greatest indicator of what exactly, they're what exactly, how many people are really actually applying to these positions, which is sort of the other problem. Then all the recruiters, then they have to kind of sift through all of that, these 100, 200, 300 applications, and try to find, okay, who's actually really qualified for this, because this is something that I read from some people on Reddit. There's a whole subreddit for UX design, and there's hiring managers that say it's like, yeah, we'll get 300 applications, but there's only like maybe 10 or 20 people that are actually qualified for this job. So I would say that for anybody that's on LinkedIn and they're, applying to jobs and they're trying to find something new, don't pay attention to that big number. It's kind of not really applicable in any way. You know, because the majority of the respondents probably aren't actually qualified. So go ahead and I'd say hit apply as well.
I was going to ask you that because I see the same thing. You find it, like every you sign up for all the alerts, so you get, I think every night I get like 6 or 7 saying like 30 jobs here, 30 jobs there, and then you go to
Oh,
click and apply, and they may have only been listed for an hour, and you already see,
mhm.
like you said, 200 people, and then parties like, well, if 200 people have already done it, why waste my time? But like you said, only a small percentage of those people truly probably either meet the qualifications or whatever that may be. So it's still worth your time to apply.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's people that have these bots that just go ahead and they hit apply for them and it's like it doesn't matter. Because like the bot just goes out and is like, oh well that's that's the title I'm looking for. I'm, nailing that apply button and sending out, the resume. It's not a focused type of search, which, like that is something that is, I'd say, it's legitimate, like, yeah, you could go ahead and apply to every single thing out there and you could have it automated. But at the same time, like that's as someone that's looking, for, a job, that's when you see that huge number, it's like it's not really telling you the whole story. It's the big problem with with a lot of data, and that's kind of part of my job as well, doing UX research. There's a lot of data. There's tons and tons and tons of data out there, and you gotta kind of gotta try to understand what's real and what isn't with it.
With your background, your expertise, how's that of, with kind of the knowledge of maybe how the information gets deciphered, how does that change your approach compared to somebody that may not have that information or that knowledge?
Well, I mean, like my approach with the job search and with kind of everything, it's really a lot of it is kind of doing the whole picture. It's seeing, okay, well, do these skills match up? And then, I mean, a lot of times I'm seeing that it's like, what helps? It's very funny. Like years ago, people said it's like, stop sending cover letters. They don't mean anything. That has really changed. Like there's been research out there that's been done where hiring managers are more open to, candidates that do send them cover letters. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, go ahead and, looking at these jobs and crafting one that highlights both your skills and what you've done in the past. That, from what I've seen, because I started doing that. When I started doing that, I've been seeing more responses, adding the cover letters and then showing, this is what I've done in the past. These are the wins that I've had where I've, reduced call center volume, where I've, where we saw a reduction in people abandoning processes, things like that, and clearly defining that on in a cover letter or in my resume has been showing them it seems to be getting more hits. I want to say where I'm getting more responses from hiring managers.
Now, is that something you kind of developed on your own, the change, or did you go, the one thing I'm sure you get, as we were kind of discussing before, is like, go to this site for this or that site for that. Is that something you did on your own, or have you been going, like, I hate to say professional help, but you know what I mean by that, like going on an outside resource, paying for that type of solution?
No, I haven't been paying for it. It's been a lot of leveraging AI for these types of things and also doing a lot of research, on what recruiters and what hiring managers are saying. And then people, I know people have their opinions on AI, but it's like, here's the thing, like, I'm not a professional resume writer. I'm not a professional cover letter writer. I am not a professional LinkedIn profile writer. There are people that, yes, you can hire to do that. That's it. It's not my job. I have 10 years of experience doing design work, not, writing resumes. If I did, I probably would have had a job by now if I had 10 years of experience writing resumes. So, using these tools out there to really work with and figure out, okay, what's the best way to, write the resume? Well, not write a resume, to write a cover letter, because that you can tell it to go ahead and write a cover letter based on that job description and using the resume that you've added to it. Okay, awesome. It's going to go ahead and it's going to start identifying those key differences like skills and everything else and matching them up and then creating a letter for you. And that is going to be that, from what I've seen, that's been really helpful and it's been working a little bit better than I used to have a stock cover letter that I would go ahead and I'd send out to places and never got a response. Now that I've started doing this, um, I've been getting more interest. So again, it's like there's so many different factors. I can't say like for certain, but it seems to be, what the difference is right now. But potentially this is what's been helping.
Yeah, I agree. I think the one thing I learned, because I've been with the same company for 18 years, so it's been a long time since I had to be back in the market. And I was talking to a friend early on, and, he said, "Hey, let me know which couple jobs you're interested in his company." And he would, refer me to them. And I'm used to, like you said, one cover letter, one resume. And then, you
Yep.
kind of just send that in, and it got kicked back. And he's like, "Well, did you like tailor it to whatever the positions were?" And I said, "No, I sent what I had based on my experience." He's like, "Well, no, just so you know, today that doesn't work like it used to. You have
No.
to really kind of go in there and change it." So I've had to adapt that, and I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just if you don't do things or haven't had to do them, you don't know the difference. So you think the old way may work, and you do have to adjust, like anything else, to what the expectations are today.
Yeah, yeah, that is the one thing that I can't stress enough, that the old way just doesn't work anymore, like eh, even ago, job hunting was way, well, okay, maybe that's not a great example because 5 years ago that was the pandemic, but okay, let's say, 7 years ago, things were, you know I do I want to say simpler? I don't really know, but things felt like they were less competitive. And that's partly because of the job market, and I think that's also partly because of the way that these systems and hiring practices work nowadays. Like these companies, they're looking for the perfect candidate. They want a person that hits every single one of their metrics, everything where it's like, we want to see someone that has every single one of these skills, and they want to find someone that has, all of the experiences that they're looking for. And the problem with that is that, your resume and cover letter have to show that. It's kind of really the only way that you're going to get through the door. Like there was someone that I was just saw their post on LinkedIn where they're saying it's like you have to think like a recruiter, and it's like, well, okay, that's a little bit of the problem, because again, I'm not a recruiter. I've never done recruiting before, but trying to understand, but so, like that's kind of a way that I have started to change my practices, is that it's like I'm listening to what recruiters are saying, listening to what they're looking for, and I'm saying, okay, it's like, all right, this is how they go about their day. This is how they do the recruitment process. They're only spending X amount of time with a resume. They're only going to go ahead and they're going to look for these keywords. So that's why so changing my process, then it's like I've said, all right, I'm going to highlight these skills that the recruiters are looking for in that job description. I'm going to go out and so it's adding those skills, right at the top with my resume, going ahead and highlighting them, where I've used them, using bold, because that captures the recruiter's attention. This is going to make and really it's sort of an idea of, let's make their job easier.
Yeah.
Make it easy for them to say, yes, see, that's the person that I want to pick up the phone and talk to, because they're hitting all of the things that I'm looking for in this job posting that I got. That's sort of how I kind of changed the way that I've been working. Because before, like I said, I like back in 2022, I was just going ahead and I was either waiting for recruiters to contact me on LinkedIn, or I was just, hitting that easy apply, sending out my stock resume, and that would be it. And that was working. That just doesn't work anymore. It's not, it's again, things have changed, and they're probably going to change 6 months from now because, well, things are very different. Things are very, very, very different, and they're changing very rapidly. And trying to keep up with it's been the other big part of how difficult the process has been.
Yeah. And the one thing, I've seen a lot of people say, which I agree with, but I think you know, looking for a job is now a job. Like it's a full-time
Oh
job,
yeah.
you're spending, as much time doing that as you would having a job, which is you have to, but you also have to take that time, whatever that is for each person, to kind of keep yourself sane, whether it be, exercising, taking a walk, because if you do this 24/7, or I don't know if you get better at it, you just get more frustrated with the process, or at least for myself, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another thing. Like, there's all those people out there that like, these influencers and bloggers and everything that are saying about like, things like deep work. And they're talking about like, ooh, dedicate 12 hours to this every day or whatever. And it's like, okay, maybe for some people that actually works. Maybe some people are wired that way and it makes sense to them. The funny thing about it is that a lot of studies have shown that it's like if you're doing a task, once you hit the 6 hour mark, you're not going to be really productive after that. You might be a little productive after that. It's like only maybe like, but it's only like maybe a 1 to 5% higher productivity. And then after 8 hours, it starts really precipitously dropping. So you're absolutely right. You go ahead and you're like, rewriting resumes and you're applying to jobs and you're doing that for a few hours. Stop, take a break, go out, go for a walk, do something else because you're going to hit that burnout point really, really, really quick. Yes, looking for a job is a full-time job. Not going to disagree with you there. But also, there's a point where you're not really helping yourself by, like, I'm going to wake up in the morning and all day long, I'm going to do this. And then finally, and I'm not going to take a break. And then finally, I'll sleep for 6 hours at night and get up and I'll do the same thing tomorrow. You're going to get burned out so quickly that you're not going to be able to, it's not a sustainable thing that you can do. So I agree with you right there. It's like, yeah, go ahead, do yourself a favor and take a break at some point. Even if it's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna devote that 16 hours a day to doing this. I don't know how anybody can do that, but that's that's just me. Um, you know, at least, every every hour or so get up, move around, do something else, kind of clear your mind and maybe get back to it, take a 5, 10, 15 minute break. But yeah, like it's the other trap that I see, job seekers falling into. They try this crazy schedule and it's like it's not sustainable. You can't do it.
Besides AI, are there any other tools you're using, like to either keep track of all the jobs you're applying for, or stages, or anything like that? Because I see that people are using those things as well.
Well, I mean, what I've been doing is that I've been using a spreadsheet. I started doing this because I noticed kind of last week that I lost track of what I was applying to. So I started, just using a spreadsheet like, okay, these are all the things that I've applied to. These are the dates I applied to. This is the link to it that I applied to. LinkedIn does a little bit of a good job of that, where you can look at all the jobs that you have applied to in the past, however long. But I find having that separate spreadsheet is a little bit easier for me to navigate because there's less distractions with it. Also, Google is like if well, I usually communicate through Gmail, so that's I found that to be a little bit easier because better because it goes ahead and it reminds you. It's like, hey, you sent something out like 5 days ago, or somebody sent you something, a few days ago. Do you want to follow up? And it's like, oh, okay, that's a good reminder. That, from what I found, has been helpful. Like just this morning, I got an alert on that where I sent something out 5 days ago and followed up with a recruiter. So that's been helpful. The tools are there's a lot of automated tools right there, but like I'd say, it's not a bad idea to use them.
Yeah. What's your thought? Because you apply for stuff, you may not hear anything back for, months. And a lot of the times, usually that case, it's usually the automated, thanks for applying.
Uh-huh.
What I've noticed a lot, especially with LinkedIn, is you'll see a job that you applied for, and then, a month later, whatever the case may be, they'll repost the same job, but I've not got a reply back at all, like good or bad.
Yeah.
Your thought, do you apply for it again, or do you just say, oh, I already applied for it, so be it?
Well, okay. So like the thing with that is that there's multiple reasons why that might happen. The company could be they're just fishing for resumes, or they want to make it look like they're growing. So they go ahead and they post a job and they don't have they don't actually have a what's the right word here? They don't intend on ever hiring someone for it. They're just doing that to make it look like, oh, we're growing and we're important. There's a few companies that do that. I don't believe that that's mostly the case, because it does cost money for them to, put a job on LinkedIn. What a lot of times I see happening is that, and recruiters have told me this in the past as well, is that sometimes, they'll go ahead, they'll close a position because budgets and funding changes or, whatever. Okay. So they're like, okay, we have to close it down. And and they're like, okay, we're not hiring for this because stuff changed. Well, all right. Then they go ahead and and then somebody, does something, find some line item in the budget where they're like, okay, cool, we can now hire for this position. Okay. So they go ahead and they reopen it. Well, the thing about it is that you applied, 1, 2, 3 months ago, all right, to that position that got closed and then it got reopened. Now the recruiter doesn't know anymore if you're still interested, because a lot can change in a month. You might not be interested anymore. You might be like, the heck with that company. They never replied to me. Oh, I'm not interested in them anymore. Or you might have landed somewhere else and you're like, well, okay, I was interested, but I landed somewhere else and it's like I'm not I don't really need this anymore. Okay, whatever. Or maybe you won the Powerball and you're a multimillionaire and you're like, I'm never going to work again, haha, I've won. The problem is the recruiter doesn't know that. They don't know any of that. Okay, so to them, that application that you sent out a month ago, that's dead. I'd say go ahead and reapply, because that then confirms to them, to the recruiter, to the hiring manager, that yes, I still am interested in this job. I want to work for your company. Now, maybe you did get rejected from that job, and because there is that chance, and they just never bother to tell you. Because a lot of companies do that nowadays. They ghost, they don't give you feedback, they don't respond. And that's partly because of, people being litigious. That's also partly because they don't have the time to do it. Because again, hundreds of applicants and everything else, and they're trying to do a million different things. They're not going to have the time. That sometimes they just don't have the time to say, yeah, we weren't interested, but hey, please follow up again. There is the chance that yes, you were rejected, but there's also a chance that this time around the recruiter sees something different and is like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call this person up and say, okay, can we set up an interview? So I would say that it's probably a good idea to go ahead and reapply. There's no reason not to.
I agree. Yeah, it's tough because, like you said, it's all timing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
so good or bad, it's timing. If you time it right, they may be looking for something slightly different than they were, 3 months ago. Same position, just different skill set, perhaps.
Yeah,
Maybe more important than the last time.
yeah,
And because they go through so many different applications, even if you were, maybe they were only going to talk to 10 people, but you were number 11. Well, like you said, they don't know if you're still looking. They're getting 200 more new resumes. So by you reapplying, makes them understand, hey, you're still interested in the position.
exactly, exactly. And there's like the only thing that I would say that it's like the only reason not to do it is like if you're still looking. The only reason not to do it is if you're like, I don't want to be rejected by them again. You're like
Yeah.
mentally like, I can't, I'm like, I don't want to, do that. And it's like, okay, that's fine. That's valid. But if you're like, hey, I am still interested and I really want this job, go ahead, reapply. I personally can't, see a reason why you wouldn't do that because like someone might go ahead and say, oh well, now you double applied and that's going to get you kicked out of the system or whatever. And it's like, well, generally the thing is that when a job reopens like that, they're going to have a whole other job ID anyways. So yes, to you the job applicant, you're like, well, that's the same job. In their internal systems, it's a brand new job. It might have the same description, it might be with the same people, but it's a brand new job with a brand new job ID. So I'd say that to the system, you haven't applied to that job before. So I'd say, yeah, yeah, go ahead, apply to the job and see what happens.
Are you so I know and not all jobs, and I love when they have it. So a lot of positions you'll see like on LinkedIn, they'll list who the say hiring team is or hiring manager is. I think I've done it even in the beginning, but definitely starting now is like sending them a personalized message to say, hey, like, hey, this is Christian Harris. Here's not saying the whole resume, but like, hey, I'd love to learn more
Yeah.
about the position, yada yada. And I'm seeing responses off that better than anything else, which is nice to see.
Yeah, I started doing that as well. And that's another one of those things where it's like, research has been showing that, personal messages where you contact, um, a hiring manager or a recruiter or whatever, whoever the job poster was, contacting them, it actually helps, because whether it's like they're kind of waiting for that type of message and they're like, wow, it's like, and they're only looking for people that are really interested in the job. So, and that confirms it. Or if it's like, or if like, you know, reaching out to them and make doing and messaging them like that, it kind of puts you at the top of their mind for that, then possibly that, yeah, you got to do anything that's going to kind of, move the needle a little bit in your favor because, it's honestly, it's hard to say, but it's like job searching has become incredibly competitive. You're competing with a lot of people for the same position, so you got to got to do anything that's going to make you look like a better candidate.
Yep, absolutely. It's fair. It's funny because when I used to do some hire or when I'd hired the companies, it's like everything else. 10 years ago, you couldn't hire enough people. Now it's you have and they're qualified people, so it's not
Yeah.
like they're not qualified. It's like everything else. Okay, if I have 10 people, as long as you get to talk to those 10 people, that's really how you make a difference. Because everybody on paper, especially with AI, I can make myself look just as good as anybody else in a sense. But until you have a
Yeah.
chance to talk to me, then you understand, well, good personality, whatever the case you're maybe looking for, then that's what how you separate it. And that's where that personalized message may come through to at least get, like anything, all we're all asking for is get our foot in the door. Then it's
Yeah.
up to us to sell ourselves. If you sell yourself better than me, hey, great for Matt. You deserve the job. But if I'm not getting a chance to sell myself outside of a piece of paper, then you don't know. Maybe they are missing out, but you never know. You don't know what you don't know, in a sense.
Yeah. And that's the whole hard part of it. That's really where it comes down to. The resume is just there to get you in the door. And that's the hardest part because once you get your foot in the door, then it's not so bad. It's just getting there is the problem.
Yeah. And then hopefully when you get the foot in the door, if you don't get the position, you get some real feedback as to why. Because
Yeah,
that's what's helpful, especially if you're applying for similar jobs. Your job is probably very similar. It doesn't, in a sense, companies may be slightly different, but what you're doing is designing, product for them. So they're looking at, but if they give you feedback, hey, Matt, we'd love to see this, then you can take that into your next interview.
right. And then sometimes I kind of wish I wish I could, go ahead and record, you know, the interview so that it's like I could play it back and be like, okay, this is where, I didn't answer something so great, or this is where things look like they kind of fell apart so that, get my own feedback. But, that's not really something you can always do. It would be great. It would be nice if, you get some feedback, because I've asked for feedback in the past, and, a lot of times they just won't give you feedback. They're just like, they'll give you something generic, which is unfortunate because I always think it's like, well, I'm trying to do better here. So if you're not going to give me feedback, I can't really do better if I don't have any feedback, but it is what it is. And it's usually, some kind of, corporate policy where they just can't. And that's something that job seekers also have to, I would say, accept, because, you're not going to get feedback a lot of the times.
I'm going to ask you about a few posts you posted. Seems silly to say that twice. You wrote, saying no sometimes is important. Why is that?
Well, okay. So, like and this is specifically with, my field, UX design. The thing is that it's like, and it's kind of, there's a term in the tech world that we use. It's called scope creep, where it's like, you have a defined problem and what we're going to build with this product. And then you start making like, okay, we need this and we need this and we need this. And then partially down the line, someone comes in and says, we need to add this new thing, this new feature. And the problem with that is that it's like, now sometimes that's legitimate. We find something through the process where like, okay, we missed something and we do need this. Sometimes there's a good reason for it, but a lot of times is that we are seeing where someone's just like, I want to have this new thing in there because I just heard about it. And it's like this, and saying no is important because we need to go ahead and we need to say, we can't add that right now. Maybe eventually in a new release, but we can't do it right now because we need to continue focusing on what we have already committed to. And it kind of makes sense because it's like, it's one of the reasons why products don't get launched. It's one of the reasons why, the life cycles, they get pushed back and they're slowed down. And it's because there's a constant, ask for new and new and new and new and new and new, when we haven't really defined, why we're adding these things. And I've seen it a lot in the past with projects where you where you constantly see these more and more asks, and if we don't say no to them, we can't ever really release the things that we said yes to. So yeah, I mean, it's something that unfortunately I don't see a lot of people in my industry talk about too very much. They talk about all kinds of different things and these kind of, debates that they have and which tools are best, and, this new way of doing things, but they don't talk about, a lot of, stakeholder and project management, which is part of what, people in my field do.
Got it. During this process, you talked about some assessment tests. What does that look like? Is that like before the interview, or is that like actually you get an interview and then they want you to take a test and move forward?
It's usually, well, there's two types of things that I've seen, these companies do, and maybe this is really something that's more common in the tech field, but they'll either have something in the beginning where you go ahead and do like, they call them asynchronous interviews now, which I'm not really thrilled with, because don't ever get to I can't, like, they pose a question and I can't ask any questions for clarification, and they're asking they'll go ahead and they'll ask you a bunch of different questions, and you're supposed to, record yourself, saying what these are, trying to answer them to the best of your ability without, again, being able to clarify anything or being able to, get a sense from, any kind of context from the interviewer. The other types of assessment tests that I've seen is something that they will do, either after like, an initial interview or after a screening where they'll go ahead and say, well, we want you to design something, which, or like for someone that's like, a developer, they'll ask them to code a thing and see how they work. So I have a lot of mixed feelings on these types of things, and there's a lot of people in the industry that also have mixed feelings on these practices.
I read a gentleman's post the other day, and I forget what field he was in. And he got down to the final one, and one of the things was they wanted a referral from people he worked with. Well, he owned his own business, and they turned him down. And because he's an independent contractor, he wrote the CEO, and it sounds similar, like he had to like design something or present something that he had to build out, and they still said, pass on him for whatever reason. And he wanted to charge him for his time. He's like, listen, I did this and this, blah blah blah. And he said the CEO actually agreed with them, and they, he wrote out like an invoice, and they paid him for his time, even though they didn't take him for the position. It was just, I said it was an interesting read, because I've had to take a couple of little tests, that prior, there's been two of them have been prior to even getting an interview, and
Mhm.
one has been, I think I had my initial one, and then it was okay that. So it was different, because one's a game, one was a game, and one, I forget what, like a word search. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was funny because, like anything on the internet, you look it up, you type in the company name or like test, and somebody's recorded the person taking them taking the test. So it's like, okay, well now you can even, it's like Cliff Notes when we were kids. You can find
Mhm.
Cliff Notes for everything if you just search.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you can find out there on the web. Even like, like with that, things like Glassdoor exist. And you can go ahead and you can search a company, and then you can look at like, not just the reviews, but you can see like, interviews and stuff where it's like, these are the questions that these guys asked me. And then you can kind of get a sense, it's like sense of, okay, this is what they're looking for. This is what you might potentially get hit with. And again, and this is all, preparation, because with my line of work, we do a lot of presentations. We present designs, present, solution, we present whatever. And that's kind of the way that I look at an interview now. It's not like, oh, it's a question and answer period or a test. It's a presentation. You're doing a presentation. And the best way to prepare and to, do a presentation is to prepare for it. Get all the information that you possibly can, rehearse what you've done. And, you know, because you're trying to present yourself. You're selling yourself, as you said before in earlier in this discussion, where that's really what an interview is. You're trying to sell yourself to this company. And honestly, like the best way to do that is to know about them and know what they're looking for.
Prepare, do your research prior to talking to somebody.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
That's a big miss. And that sometimes is a big miss. It seems like an obvious one, but it can be a big miss. If you had one piece of advice for someone looking to follow like the same career path, what would it be for them?
Like the same career path that I did, like,
Yeah.
getting into this field. The thing about that is that is like I mean, I wish I could say that it's like this was something that always interested me and this is what I studied in college and everything else, and it's like that's not it at all. I started working in tech because I fell in with this small business that was, in the tech field, but they wanted somebody to design graphics. And I studied art and digital media, so it's like I knew how to do it. Started working with them, and I started learning more about what the company was like, and I taught myself how to code and all of these different things. And like honestly it was kind of unplanned. So like my career path is, and then I did work in different things. I did work in like print, I did work in doing email campaigns, all sorts of different things. I don't know if somebody could follow the same type of career path that I did anymore, partly because of the fact that it's like the field is a lot more mature than it was, because like back in 2010, I was starting to advocate um, that for like doing work for web design clients and these applications that we look at analytics and we look at research and we try to figure out what the users need. And a lot of people were acting like we're not going to do that. That's what, why are you saying that? It's like, we just want you to like build something for us. And it's like, okay, whatever. So like back then, it's like nobody was really talking about user experience design or design thinking or anything for these products. Now it's all over the place, and so it's like partially they want people that have all of this experience, that have done this before, instead of like, what I was doing, where it's like I'm doing a bunch of different things and I just kind of started doing it on my own. I'm not sure somebody could follow that career path. But like my biggest advice to anybody that's setting out on either a career path for a UX designer or a career in anything is find out what it's actually like. Don't go ahead and think it's like, oh, I looked at this job description, I know what it is. It's like, because you don't. You don't know what the day to day is like. You don't know what you're actually going to be doing or working on, or all of the pitfalls. I'd say, talk to people that have been working in the field for a long time and find out, what it is they actually do. Because what it says that you do on paper and what your actual experiences are, I've found to be two hugely different things.
Great. I think that's the key is, like you said, talk to people that do whatever the job is.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, you get the real feel for it. And I think, now I'm going to sound like an old person, the younger generations don't do those things because they're used to just, whatever it is, they're used to just typing away and just doing what they need to do. Give me a list and I can get it done. And not really communicating. I mean, with the people around them. I was talking to, not really related, but kind of talking to my son who's in college and, doing okay in class, but not great. I'm like, do you talk to the people around you? Because that's what we would used to do because you're sitting next to the same person for weeks. He's like,
Hmm.
no. I'm like, well, why don't you talk to them and see if they're running into the same thing and you guys can help each other? And that's what people really want to do is help other people. So that's why, talk to somebody who's in the similar position. They'll give you insights, the good and the bad about a company, whatever the case may be. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah. It's true. It's kind of hard. I don't know. I remember, back in, high school, college, everything. It's like everything, like things were more like you said, you're working with other people, you're talking with them, and you're trying to figure out how to do something. Hey, are you having the same problem with this? And I don't know what's changed. I don't know if it's like, if it's because of the internet, because I mean, when I was in high school, the internet just kind of really started, being, a huge thing. And, now these kids, they're online all the time. Or if it's, if it's something, if it's that, or if it's, like changes to, how education is, where everything is, these standardized tests now. I don't know what the difference is, but I mean, I think that's a great observation where, it feels like stuff is, for them at least, is less collaborative. And I think that is really an important part of, anything that you're doing, whether it be, you know, looking for a job, or in your job, or in your career, or, just even like, hobbies, or, like, hey, I need to find something out, instead of, asking Google, or, one of these AI things, talk with a real person.
As Yeah, that just seems like it should be obvious. But the first thing they do is if they don't know something, it's boom, 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 and they get the information. Whereas they're not. It's a lost art. it's a skill set. I mean, it really is a skill set. Like I said, most jobs you do have to collaborate with people at some level. You may not have to
Uh-huh.
sit next to them at a desk, but if you can't hold a conversation with people, even if you're coding all day, at some point you have to communicate and be able to, express what you're either trying to put through and get your point across. And they, said, no, that now I'm just going off on something. But yeah, that's a miss on the young workforce too. It's not just kids in college; it's the young workforce,
Yeah.
at least in my
Well,
opinion.
I almost feel like it's partially like the workforce overall too. Like sometimes with management where it's like, you don't hear from management for a good portion of the time you're there. Um, they're not going ahead and they're not, setting expectations, or they're not like saying it's like, or they're not checking in or whatever. And it's like, and half the time I'm thinking it's like, just talk to me. Just talk to me. You know, send out an email or be like, like there's these performance metrics with like, Jira tickets or whatever. It's kind of like, hey, you want to know what's going on? Have a conversation. I think, and I think you're very right with that assessment where, people want to help. People want to work with each other. But if you're setting up all these roadblocks, or, you got this person that thinks, oh, I'm just going to sit here and code all day and I don't have to talk to anybody. That's not really kind of the way to work. And it's not really, it's not, it's working, but it's not working. It's not, it kind of sounds weird. It's like, okay, you're making something, but you're not actually making something that's going to, solve a problem. And that's really what I feel like that's really what, most jobs are. You're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't really kind of matter the industry. That's what we all do. Whether you're selling something, creating something, you're solving
Hmm.
something for someone.
Yep.
So no, that's actually about as simple as you can make it. Every job is really solving a problem.
It's true.
That's actually a great way to end it. Yeah. Well, hey, Matt, I appreciate you taking the time today. I know we probably went a little longer than you were expecting, so thank you for staying on. Thank you for sharing your insights. People will find this helpful. So, I wish you nothing but the best in your job search, and I hope it's as short as possible.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope things go well for you as well. And I hope
I
that
appreciate
even when you find something, that you continue doing this and helping more people. It was great being on here and having a chance to discuss everything with you.
And I appreciate it. And the goal for me is that this project, my goal is to do 52 for the year. So try to do like one a week, regardless of, what the future holds. I'll be at like 10, hopefully by the end of this week. So we'll see, but that is the goals. Matt, thank you very much again.
Okay, well, thank you.
Have a good day.
All right, you too. Thanks.